Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day you're watching this. I do hope it finds you well. My name is John, and I am an author, and I'm coming to you here today on my Writing Wednesday to talk about my a little bit more in depth on the history of my first book, The Shadow of the Past, which is available on Amazon. I would love for you to check that out. There's links for that below. Um, this book, I started coming up with the story, the core premise of this um, highborn, as I tend to phrase it, or I later renamed it as Seera Elfen or Sixth Stream Elf, basically an elf that is equally balanced between the six main elements, presenting a much more powerful and a much more human like appearance. I started coming up with this when I was in high school. I would frequently daydream it. If there was like a creative writing assignment in school, I'd write down little doodles or snippets. I'd pretty well had the first the first few chapter, the first some of the sort of main elements of the story, him, discovering this threat to the world and meeting these elementals, and first a few of the initial action scenes in the book. I had fleshed out then, and I would talk about it a lot. Like anytime I run into a friend or someone interested in creative writing, I would talk about this. um, in particular, when I was a sophomore in college, so this was a few years this was running around in my head at this point. I had a roommate that was also interested in fantasy and in writing, and had in fact started writing his own fantasy story that inspired me. So that in August of 2007, between my sophomore and junior year of college, I sat down and wrote out the first three chapters. What's now the first four chapters, because the original third chapter I split into two in a later edit. But the first three chapters of the rough draft I wrote in 2007, sent it to my friend Doug for feedback, and then school started, got busy with classes and video games and X, Y, and Z, so never really picked it up or did anything. Never didn't do much else with it. Then the following summer, I didn't get much work initially. Between I had again work, and between my junior and senior year, I took an amazing study trip to Italy, seeing a lot of the ancient Greek and Roman ruins, which was just phenomenal. But again, by August, I had a few weeks where I wrote chapters 4, 5, and 6 of the story, which is now 5, 6, 7, and 8. Um, yeah, I think I split chapters there too, in a later edit. Um, and yeah, and that came, again, sent it off to my my friend Doug, who we were trading chapters and giving each other feedback on our stories at this point. We talked, and same thing. Got busy with being a senior, my senior honors thesis, um, um, my senior honors thesis, and coursework and stuff like that. Applying for grad school and deciding what I was going to do next in my life. So that went by the wayside again. And I graduated, moved out here to moved states for graduate school, and just end up doing a different path. But then I realized I was going to get very busy between grad school and being a teaching fellow and everything else I needed to do, that I really needed to. Oh, and there had been a couple points where I'd sat down to try to write, but just I absolutely could not figure out. I knew where the rest of the story was going, but there was a chapter I was at where I just could not figure out how to get it to flow. Like, I knew, I had everything and I'd written everything up to the start of the chapter. And then everything after the chapter I had pretty much set. But this one chapter I couldn't figure out. And at the time, if I was writing now, I probably would have just skipped the chapter and left sort of a placeholder and come back to it later. But at the time, I just couldn't get myself to move past it, and that's probably the biggest struggle I've had with writer's block so far in my writing. But I finally managed to um, get through the chapter, write what I wanted and needed to write for it. Um, and then from there, just with the deadline of I had about a month till grad school was starting and nothing to do. I just sat down and absolutely buckled down and finished the rough draft of the book. Similarly, sent it off for feedback and just sat on it. Got busy with grad school. When I was in my second year of grad school, I think. Maybe first, but I think it was the second year of grad school. I did my first major edit of the book, and that was really prompted by there was a publisher, Tor, I think, that was doing like free manuscript submission. Submit your manuscripts. If it was, to be, the top winner be selected for publication, etc. So, I did that, really edit it, cut it down, length a little bit, and incorporated some of the feedback I'd had from my friend Doug to get it down. And then, after that, I just sort of tinkered with it. I would go through and do the occasional edits, move through it slowly, but once more, I largely let the book just sit and you know I'd edit, I'd get feedback. I sent it to my parents and my sibling to read, um, and got feedback from them, incorporated some of that. So I would work on it in fits and starts. I'd like reread, edit a few chapters, and then ignore it for a little while. Hi, Melody. Goodbye, Melody. Um, so yeah, that's what I would do, and really that was left until spring of 2017, where really mostly what I was doing was just tinkering with it. Where sort of after talking about it for so long and tinkering with it, get out of here, dogs. Um, Tinkering with it that um, I got challenged by um, both my mom and my wife to that I was serious about being a writer, that it should be a challenge, that before my 30th birthday, in August of that year, that I would actually work on getting this self-published, which I worked out and discovered in searching around that it was actually surprisingly easier to do that on Amazon than I thought. So I buckled down, did a really serious, edit. That's where some of the chapters got splits. Um, did a big edit of that, and then got it published that year. Um, with sort of a generic cover and stuff like that. I have it somewhere. I should have brought it out to show you. But and then a couple years later, just in going back, I just realized I wasn't the happiest with some of the aspects of it. Just some parts of it didn't quite work for me. They weren't quite what I was looking for or hoping they'd turn out. So I spent some time going back and doing another serious start to finish edits. Some of the big things I added in that edit were some of my secondary characters that sort of just played roles in the story. I sort of fleshed out and gave more character and agency and backstory. Um, I added more to the setting, like weather and rain and stuff like that. And there was a couple of scenes that really just didn't quite, work for me. Or as I got, older and sort of my focus on things changed, I really, I really, made a change. I needed to make some changes. Because also this started off as very much a sort of the flow of the book, the idea of how things would go was very, black and white, good and evil, very sort of, you know, I would almost call it like video game esque structure of like go here, do a thing, get a power up. Go here, do a thing, get a power up. Go here, do a thing, get a power up. So over the years, as that was what I started writing the book as in 2007. In 2008, it become a little bit more of some of the stuff I'd read and experienced became a little bit more of an ambiguous story. And then, the rest of the book when I wrote it in 2009 had become a lot more, sort of my worldview was continuing to develop, became a lot more philosophical, sort of exploring the idea of good and evil and what exactly good and evil means, and sort of fleshed out and complexified things. So a lot of my edits, especially in the first, I think it's 6, 7, 8 chapters of the book, was really trying to bring those older chapters in line with the rest of the book, which is a real challenge in editing. And personally, I feel that I kind of understand why. It's always been my understanding that, excuse me, it's always been my understanding that Tolkien started writing Lord of the Rings as a sequel to The Hobbit, and you sort of get that structure in the first half of Fellowship of the Rings. The journey from Hobbiton to Rivendell, where it's very kind of like The Hobbit is. It's very like episodic. Like each chapter is sort of its own mini adventure almost. Um, Before it sort of flows a little bit better. And I've always found it interesting that Tolkien never seems to have obviously there was editing things, like the importance of like the ring and Sauron and all kinds of stuff like that. I'm sure was added once Tolkien determined where that sort of the story was absolutely ultimately going to go. But I've always wondered why it still maintains some of that structure. And after the difficulty of editing chapters where I had a much, much different conception of how the story would flow and where it was going to match the rest of the book, that is extremely difficult. I kind of understand, if my guess is correct, why Tolkien only didn't do that a ton when he was editing Lord of the Rings. But anyway, it got to the point where I was a lot more happy with it. I also designed the cover art for it. Did more with, making it more unique, more me. And yeah, that's sort of you know, what I've worked on, and I republished that as a second edition in 2009. Overall, I'm a lot more happy with it. I understand this isn't particularly uncommon, but I will fully admit that with my book, that I sort of still have. I as time has passed, I've gotten a lot more positive and proud of it. But particularly at the time, when I was writing it and all the editing, like just the close proximity of all the editing, I definitely had a very much a love-hate relationship with this book. Um, Being a combination of both extremely proud of it and also just seeing all the little, like just being up close and personal with all the little flaws and things I was trying to change, or things that just didn't quite match what I had in my brain. Um, it just didn't work for me. So, there's some stuff I'm really proud of. I mean, there's a chapter that I wrote from the point of view of a statue. I don't know where that idea came from, but it just came to me, and it's probably the chapter I'm the most proud of, honestly, in this. There's some sequences that still don't, after editing it, had to be a dozen times, I'm still not 100% happy with, or just don't quite match what I originally had in my head, but I think they're about as good as they can be. Um, you know, there's, of course, despite the Lord knows how many rounds of editing, there's still the typos I find when I'm going through this or rereading it, like I'm doing. So, anyway, that's a brief history of my first work, The Shadow of the Past. I really hope you check it out. Link down below for Amazon. And yeah, I will be tomorrow for my, as I call it, Storytime Thursday. I will be reading Chapter 8, Matra, the Tower Atop the World. I hope you enjoy me and check that out. Also, I have a second book, which I'll probably talk about more next week, in The Sunburned Red. Link below also. I would love to hear your comments. What are your own experiences with writing, the writing process, your own struggles or best practices for writing or editing and getting things to match each other in XYZ? I would love to hear your comments down below. Please like, share, subscribe. All of that would be amazing. Follow my socials. For the moment, again, my name is John. I am an author, and I hope you all have a wonderful day, get a chance to do or experience something creative, and I'll catch you on the next one.